I am concerned, and I wrote about this in Morning Shots, and I wanted to get your take on this, about the growing rift on the left. And by the way, I don't mean all of people on the left, and I'm not even saying the people who are sympathetic with Palestine, but there is an anti-Biden left when it comes to Israel policy. Now, the polls would suggest that the strong majority of Democrats back what Joe Biden is doing. I think there's overwhelming congressional support among Democrats for what Joe Biden is doing, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a problem, because you have an activist left, including a real generation gap when it comes to sentiment on Israel and Palestine, where the numbers are very different, or starkly different among Democratic voters who are over the age of 50 versus 18 to 34. So give me your take on this, because it does seem as if there is a ramping up of both anti-Israel rhetoric on the left and more specifically anti-Biden rhetoric on the left. Your take, Will, because this is your world. These are your folks.
Okay, so here's where I am going to be the House lib. I'm going to disagree here. I just think there obviously is an anti-Israel left. I think it's relatively small, and it's certainly smaller today than it was before this horrendous attack on Israel. The other thing I want to know, Charlie, is anytime I see poll data separated by age, I want to see that poll data over time, because what I want to know is it that today's generation, younger generation, is different and is going to be different from previous Democrats? Or is it that this is the way young people think, and as they age and have more experience, they change? And I mean, what I see in the Democratic Party, Charlie, is tremendous unity, surprising degree of unity behind Biden as he stands with Israel. Now, it's an easy case, admittedly, because the Hamas attack on Israel was horrendous beyond any previous Hamas attacks on Israel. And it was absolutely vicious, and it targeted civilians. And the magnitude of it was enormous. So that makes it relatively easy for Biden to unite the party. But Charlie, I think he has united the party. I mean, I see.
Yeah, go on.
I see across the spectrum. I see like Rashida Tlaib is like the only Democrat in Congress who's really still standing out there. Maybe Omar, right? And that's it. Who else is out there?
Well, again, you do have yes, this is true. I am concerned though about what is happening among the activist left, and keep in mind that Joe Biden can't really afford to lose, to have demotivated younger voters. He can't afford to lose a significant number of votes to the Cornel Wests of the world. You have people like John Fetterman who have been absolute stars on this, calling out the squad, and yet you had 400 congressional staffers, I'm assuming mostly Democrats, who signed a letter calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Now, again, not necessarily a huge number of, these are people who are not elected officials, but as Will Bunch said in the Philadelphia Inquirer, these folks have an outsized influence within liberal circles. I mean, I'm seeing headlines from The Intercept, Joe Biden funding genocide. I am seeing union leaders who have been at the White House. The guy who runs the Amazon union is tweeting one pro-Hamas Palestinian slogan after another. So there is and I guess what I'm thinking, you said that it's easy, and I agree. By the way, you and I agree completely on what happened in Israel on October 7th. But also, we know that as of this week, we're going to see the narrative begin to focus on Israel's reaction. You already have AOC out saying that Israel is committing war crimes. You are going to have an increasing death toll. You are going to see some really wrenching pictures. And I guess the question is, which direction is public opinion going to go? That there will be more sympathy for the Gazan civilian victims going forward. And the left, and I mean the pro-Hamas left, is going to blame Joe Biden for this. So, yeah. Okay.
So for the first time, Charlie, I feel like I'm having a good old-fashioned conversation with a conservative radio host.
Okay.
So you're focusing on some people on the left who I think are a relatively small number. I'll have to look at the polling on this. But Charlie, a week ago when I looked at the polling on Israel, Democrats were more supportive of defending Israel than Republicans were by about 10 points.
Well, so look at this, though. Here, I'm showing you the CBS poll. I hope you can see. You probably can't. You probably can't see it. You can't. Yeah. This is the CBS poll. Should U.S. send weapons supplies to Israel? Democrats should 47%, should not 53%. So a majority of Democrats were against sending weapons. Now, that may have been an outlier, but I also think that it's point out that when you break down these numbers, I'm just looking now for the Will Bunch column.
What were the Republican numbers?
The Republican numbers were 57% favored sending weapons, 43% against. So again, this is Will Bunch, who's a liberal. It says a poll conducted by CNN shortly after the attacks found that 81% of Americans over the age of 65, which would be Biden's silent generation, support Israel. They sympathize with him. But it is the 18 to 34 age bracket. This number drops from 81% to just 27%. And so, he writes, look, these young DC power players are small in number, but they could exercise an outsized influence if they went public with criticism of Biden's policies, right as he was struggling with other college-educated young voters like them. A lot could happen in 13 months, but even small movement toward a third-party candidate like Cornel West or a rise in stay-at-home apathy could be brutal for Biden. Now, again, here's Nick Cataggio. I'm just talking about the trend lines, and I'm concerned about this because I think this is why centrists like us are going to be really crucial in supporting what Joe Biden is doing here. He basically points out, look, with the bloodshed increasing in Gaza, the left-wing outrage will grow day by day. The perception that Israel's operation achieved nothing meaningful at great human cost will become leftist orthodoxy. And those leftists will blame Joe Biden, a president for whom they feel no special affection, for having taken moral ownership of the conflict preemptively and enthusiastically. Okay.
A couple of things. First of all, this narrative that the left is rising in defense of Palestine and against Israel, the people, I'm hearing it from the people who have an interest in saying it, which is, Will Bunch and Nick Cataggio. I mean, it's people on the left, on the left, who want to have expressed that they have power are going to say, hey, look, Joe Biden can't afford to alienate us, right? They're going to play it up. And then on the right, you're going to have the people saying the left is the problem because that's what the people on the right like to believe, right? And what if the reality isn't that? What if the reality is that there's a lot of people who are in the middle, who are on the Democratic, the center left, who just aren't represented in those numbers, who are not among the signers of those things. But I wanted to make one other point here, which is you were referring earlier to people who express a pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas line. I want to separate those two things.
Right.
And I want to know exactly.
Right.
I want to know exactly what the guy from Amazon, whether the union or whatever, said. What exactly? Because there are ways in which I, who am not at all pro-Hamas, am pro-Palestinian rights, and I'm certainly against civilian casualties. And if there is a movement towards expressing concern about killing civilians in Gaza and the number who are being killed, number one, I share that. I don't think that's a left-wing position. It's not a pro-Hamas position. It's not an anti-Israel position. It's a pro-civilian life position. And may I point out, Charlie, one of the entities calling on Israel to slow down and rethink a ground invasion of Gaza is the United States government, Joe Biden and his administration, because they recognize that the massive casualties aren't just morally bad; they're politically dangerous for Israel. That they can ignite the region
and I agree.
Against Israel and us.
Right. No, the guy that I was quoting from Amazon was actually using the slogan, from the river to the sea.
Oh, that's an anti-Israel slogan. Let's be clear about that.
Right. That's Hamas. And so, and then when he got pushback, he said, "Viva Palestine, Viva Cuba." Not sure what that was about.
I need to know more about this guy. That is a far left and terrorist sympathetic position. So I agree with that.
So no, but this is a distinction that is important. I do think that it is legitimate to say, okay, and the Biden administration, I think, is doing a pretty good job in trying to, look, we support your right of self-defense, but do not make the kind of mistakes we made after 9/11. Important point. Show restraint. Do not lose the moral high ground. Very, very important point. I also think it's legitimate to be concerned about the extent of civilian casualties. I don't have a problem with that. I don't refer to that when I'm talking about the pro-Hamas. I'm saying if you use a slogan like, for example, from the river to the sea, that sort of thing, then you're using a Hamas slogan. And I think that there is a bright line there.
Okay, I am definitely the House lib.
Yeah.
I'm hearing so many echoes, Charlie, in this discussion of the defund the police debate, where it was in the interest of the Republican Party and the right to portray Democrats as wanting to defund and abolish law enforcement, when in fact a very small percentage of Democrats actually believed in abolishing law enforcement. That's still a very fringe minority position. And the people who were talking about defunding meant different things by it, not necessarily, fewer cops, but like more mental health. Anyway, the point is, I'm hearing a little bit of a caricature, what I think is a caricature of, in this case, the position of concern about Palestinian casualties, right? A position that I think is a mainstream concern.
Right.
And
I agree with you.
I believe it's important to embrace that, to acknowledge the morality of it, and to distinguish that from the people you're talking about. The from the river to the sea people are talking about, you have to choose between the existence of Israel, right, and the existence of Palestine. And that's the Hamas position. It's constant warfare.
It is constant warfare, and it is very, very, very dangerous. So where do you think we're going to go here? Because it does feel like we are right on the edge of a possibly widening conflict. I think one of the real tragedies of this particular moment is that Israel is led by somebody like a Benjamin Netanyahu, who, frankly, is a deeply unsympathetic character. And I believe, and I want to be really careful here. I think that his failure his failure in protecting the nation, his failure, the role he played in dividing the country and making it weak, cannot be overstated. I think I hope he's politically dead. There seems to be a lot of indication that Israelis are sick of him. But I have to say that it worries me that somebody who has been as reckless and as extreme, weirdly enough, as Benjamin Netanyahu, is right now in charge of deciding this. And if you're looking for a moment of nuance and restraint, is he the guy? So talk to me about that.
So, Charlie, here's where I think there is unfortunately a parallel between our country and Israel. The people in our country, we've been talking about the crazies in the Republican Party, and every time we think someone's crazier, we find somebody crazier than the last guy, right? So now we're clutching on to anybody, even people who voted against certifying the election. We're like, well, he's not as bad as Jim Jordan, right? So in Israel, we can talk about how bad Netanyahu is, and Netanyahu absolutely failed.
Way worse. Right.
Netanyahu had one job that was supposed to make up for all his other flaws, so that was security, and he miserably failed, right? So he should be out on his butt for that reason alone. But, Charlie, it gets worse, because what's going on in Israel right now, from what I've read, is Netanyahu is not the far right. His own defense minister wants to launch more aggressive. Netanyahu is actually a restraining voice possibly on the ground war in Gaza, but also in engaging Hezbollah, because supposedly the Israeli defense minister wants to go engage Hezbollah, which is already
nut,
involved.
By the way. But the defense minister, he is a complete nut, right?
And there's a cabinet. The Israeli cabinet is, if you think the House Republicans are bad,
show.
Let me introduce you to the Israeli cabinet. Right?
I know.
Every right-wing party has somebody in there. But anyway, the danger, I fully agree with this. The danger in Israel right now we're talking about what Israel is doing in Gaza, and Israel is the aggressor, and we can debate that. But if Israel ends up, there are already engagements on the Lebanese border, in Syria, in the West Bank. So that's 3 other fronts that could open in addition to the one in the south in Gaza. And let me tell you, Israel has been in wars with 4 fronts before. It's not good, right? And they've survived it. but this could get much, much worse. And that's why I think I'm relieved to hear that Netanyahu is not the crazy one in terms of engaging Hezbollah. And I'm also relieved to hear that the United States is doing everything it can to try to avoid these other fronts becoming live action.
Well, I mean, it is worth pointing out, though, that Netanyahu did name these people to his cabinet. I mean, these people were empowered and enabled by him. But you were right. As far as I can tell, he's marginalized some of them with this war cabinet. But again, I wish I had more confidence in his judgment and in his character, but I don't. This is a cautionary note. What happens when you prioritize a culture war over actually doing the one job you're supposed to be doing? I hope that people are paying attention. I'm skeptical. So, Will, what are you going to be keeping your eye on this week other than the ongoing goat rodeo in the House, which I must admit, I watch with I'm going to confess, a mixture of, entertainment, schadenfreude, and just pure dread, because you know that it can always get worse.
Yeah, no, I expect more inertia in the House, and we'll have entertainment, but no action. We won't get any result there. The piece that I'm doing right now, and then I'm hope to be out tomorrow morning, is about the situation in Israel, and specifically about this strike on the hospital. Remember that there was the New York Times and everybody else portrayed as an Israeli airstrike, and now it's been completely debunked. And we now have the Times itself publishing an editorial note saying, "Sorry, our bad." But the underlying problem is the so-called Ministry of Health in Gaza, which is, I've just been reading what they publish, and there's a reason why they put out this story and got it completely wrong. It is that they are fundamentally a propaganda outfit, and what they publish is propaganda.
People need to keep that in mind every time they read these numbers too.
People think that the Gaza Health Ministry is like the World Health Organization or the CDC or something. It is not. It is a propaganda outfit, and I am seeing more references to the Hamas-run health ministry, and that's good, because what people need to understand is this is Hamas talking. This is not just a bunch of doctors. That's why the numbers have been completely unreliable and the allegations were false and were not retracted. So anyway, that's my focus for the next couple of days.
Well, it's important to make this point, because I think that the whole bombing of the hospital, you look back on it as an extraordinary success for propaganda, because they set the narrative. The narrative caught fire, set the world on fire, had tremendous consequences before the truth limped along and corrected the record. So in terms of, and this is the world we live in, where the instant takes, the hot takes, the power of AI, which is going to make all of this so much worse, the power of social media, you can get a lie out there that can actually change the world. I mean, think about the consequences of that. You had the president of the United States flying into Israel, had important meetings scheduled with leading Arabs, and none of that took place because of this false report about the hospital. In fact, you're still seeing the hospital being cited. I mean, there's some things that are apparently irrefutable, but this is an important case. It's an important case to remember. It's certainly an important lesson for the media, which continues to report civilian deaths, sourcing this health ministry, when by now they ought to know better. So keep it up. Will, it is great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Charlie. We
will do this again, of course, next week. And thank you all for listening to this Monday edition of the Bulwark Podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back tomorrow, and we'll do this all over again.